So we've all secretly been contaminating ourselves with plastic, huh? I think I can believe it. Praxeus, the return of writer Pete McTighe, and of course in collaboration with Chris Chibnall. I was very excited about Pete McTighe coming back as he wrote one of my favorites from season 11, Kerblam. That episode was one that I had no expectations for, but then I was delighted to see that it was a incredibly fun murder mystery with some very strong overtones of satire against Amazon.com. It's a big story. It's a globe-trotting story. This is an episode that spans Hong Kong, Madagascar, and Peru, and somehow the episode just makes it work. And by extension, because they have all these different locations, they are able to give all of Team TARDIS something to do. You've got Ryan out in Peru, and he does something that's vital to the progression of the story. You've got Yaz and Graham in Hong Kong, who discover a lot of things, and even Yaz goes on an extra excursion, which also comes into play. And then you've got Graham, of course, being wonderful as always, actually contributing to a lot of the sub-characters. And the sub-characters are actually really good in this one, too. You've got Jake, who's a disgraced cop. You got Adam, an astronaut, and you got Gabriella, who's a prominent YouTuber. And all of them have very relatable, very understandable motivations, and because they do a good job fleshing them out, you actually get some really strong payoffs. I will say, Gabriella, not so much. Once you really kind of get the vibe of her, by the end of the story, she doesn't really feel like she comes to any sort of, like, grand revelation, and she doesn't really do much to contribute to anything as far as the resolution goes. Maybe just helps out in the background. Even then, her involvement in the story doesn't feel pointless at all. She still helps Ryan get to a certain point in order for him to know what the hell is going on. So she definitely does contribute something to the story, but not as much as the rest of them. The supporting characters aren't the only ones who really get to shine in this one. This is one where I don't want to call them villains. I would actually say they're antagonists. And when you find out the ebb and flow of what they're doing, it's on one side very tragic, and on another side very shocking. And then on a third level, actually very relatable and very understandable. And you look at them less like amoral demigods and more just like desperate idiots. On one side, you're condemning them for what they're doing, but ultimately you understand why they're doing it, so you look at them with the utmost sympathy. And I will say, when it came to the core focal antagonist character, once you get to the resolution with her, you actually feel this pang of sadness. And the best part is Jodie Whittaker in her performance, especially in that scene. She's great all around this entire story, but in that one particular moment, you really get a good chance to connect with the Doctor as far as what she's feeling and what you're feeling. You're also very sad because this antagonist character you don't really know is the antagonist. You actually really enjoy the way the Doctor and this person are actually working together in tandem throughout the entire thing. So it was really a blast seeing Jodie Whittaker work in this episode and really getting to see her through different modes of discovery, intrigue, curiosity. It's all the traits that, in my opinion, really define what makes a Doctor a lot of fun and what gets you invested in the story. And I think Jodie really did a good job bringing us along on the ride. Praxeus is a viral outbreak story with some very strong environmental overtones. And the thing that really takes a story which is definitely prone to a lot of tropes. I mean, of course, go watch the movie Outbreak for pretty much the basic guide on how to do your viral outbreak movie. But this one was able to raise the stakes to a point where it was actually personally affecting, to the point where it was almost invasive. Because one of the things that causes this epidemic is the ever-present menace of plastic pollution, where we as a collective species have actually been contaminated by the constant presence of it, to the point where even if we don't know it, is actually in our system. And this episode did a good job putting that into perspective, and I actually kind of felt a little uncomfortable. I was like, ooh, they do a good job hitting home how that could open us up to certain kinds of afflictions that we may not be prepared for. And for extra measure, on a visual level, they do a great job representing how horrific this particular plague is. The look of the Praxeus virus is actually, I definitely would never, it looks painful. And I mean, granted, it's cool to look at, but simultaneously, when you see what it does to people, especially in the late stage, it definitely seems like something you would never in a million years ever want to have. And the thing that makes it even freakier, it'd be one thing if this was just an airborne virus, but the fact that this is transmitted via plague-infected birds, that adds another painful element to it. I mean, definitely Hitchcockian, and definitely a hell of a lot more effective than Birdemic. Way more effective than Birdemic. This story was actually orchestrated quite well. It seemed to be aware of a lot of the tropes that usually comes with viral outbreak movies. Because, of course, the stakes are always, will this person be okay? Oh my god, they've got the virus. Are they going to come through? Are they not? And most of the time you can usually predict those beats. And it seems like they were savvy to a lot of those tropes, like when you have one supporting character get the virus, and they actually are able to orchestrate the story where we may run the possibility that he could be cured, but unfortunately, in all likelihood, may not. They actually do a really good job selling the uncertainty of it. I'm not going to tell you how it pays off, but suffice to say, I was very satisfied by it. And again, because the supporting cast are really well fleshed out, particularly Jake and Adam, I was actually really caring. And that's the one thing they made sure to prioritize. They made us care. And because Graham, Ryan, Yaz really do a good job being outgoing to all these characters, they remind us why it's important to care about them. And then when we get to a fake out moment, which is tantamount to the resolution of the story, because everything is so frantic and because everyone's rushing to get from one place to another in the hopes that things will be okay, you actually lose focus on another character in the right moment, and then when it pays off later, you're like, oh my god. And again, you don't know how that's truly going to pay off. Some may say that the environmental messages in this one may be a touch heavy-handed. I suppose that's just how much you can stomach. I come from the times where green sludge from a chemical company creates giant maggots and creates a veritable plague, and they're also saying that fungus is a really good substitute for meat. You know, when you got one that really beats down the environmental message, something like Praxeus, I feel plays it a lot better, especially better than Orphan 55. It's almost as if they may have learned their mistake within the filming of the season, learned from their mistake of Orphan 55, and were able to execute it a hell of a lot better. That they don't give us false promises that the idea that the Doctor has any kind of solution to this problem. They still remind us that this is still a problem to this very day, and we really have to work to find some kind of solution. And that is refreshing. I like that it doesn't lie to us, and it doesn't try to give us any kind of hopeful message that may never come, because it's one thing to make promises, but it's another thing to make unrealistic promises. And that's definitely one thing that Praxeus avoided doing. I've seen Doctor Who do some really on-the-nose metaphors for what's going on in the world, especially when it comes to environmental stuff. And yeah, this one definitely has no problem hitting you over the head with it, but I think because they do a really good job hitting home how it actually does affect us as a species, I was totally on board for it. And I can't really bring myself to begrudge it. This episode came right after Fugitive of the Jadoon, which dropped like an entire barrage of plot bombs, which just, you know, friggin' made your brain explode. It was interesting to see that all of a sudden we're going into a self-contained story that does not address anything that just went on the previous story, and the fact that this episode was still able to deliver the goods on its own terms is another testament to the fact that Chris Chibnall, I actually feel, I'm again still cautious, but I'm getting this strong feeling that he's finally feeling a lot more secure in the way he wants Doctor Who to go. And the best part is, even though this was a pretty dark episode, it still had some good humor to it, it still had some really great character interactions, and it still, in the end, felt like Doctor Who. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that this may be another strong highlight in Chibnall's run, or do you feel like this is one that just bludgeoned you over the head with its themes? Leave it all in the comments below. And for more addictive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click, thou shalt be served.